Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Keeping the Beat, an engaging web series hosted live by TNMEA in partnership with the CMA Foundation. Tune in weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn from and interact with music professionals from around the globe representing every facet of the vast world of music. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. And Brad, this is our 51st nightly program, which I'm really proud of. My name is Julie Hill. I'm chair of the University of Tennessee at Martin's Department of Music and also a proud co-creator of Keeping the Beat by TNMEA. I have the distinct honor of hosting Dr. Brad Kent this evening, who is the State Director of Music for the Texas University Interscholastic League. That took a little practice. Tonight, Dr. Kent will be speaking on the topic of United We Stand, Divided We Fall. We encourage all of our live viewers tonight to interact by replying to this live video stream with your questions, comments, and we will try to respond to those throughout the hour with the assistance of our Keeping the Beat team member, Catherine Sam, who is on assistance tonight. Thank you, Kat. One disclaimer, while this is being streamed live, it will remain on the Keeping the Beat Facebook page forever. So watch your comments because others will see them. They'll be archived. I'll get the program started now by asking Dr. Kent to take over and start with some information about his background, career path. Essentially, Brad, how did you end up with this really cool and important gig, and what were the steps you took along the way to get there? Bradley Kent, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. I first want to thank you for the opportunity, the invitation to be here this evening. Thank you to the Tennessee Music Educators Association for the opportunity. And I have to give a special shout out to my good friend, Dr. Brian Zader, for connecting us to make this opportunity happen. So thank you all so much. And I hope you're all, other than the obvious that we're all dealing with in our lives right now, I hope you're getting to enjoy a little bit of downtime in your summer. And I hope the information that we discussed tonight proves helpful in some way to you. So my quick story, I've been a music educator, administrator, just finished the 28th year in the business. I did my undergrad music ed degree at Louisiana State University. And I got back to Texas. I lived in Texas as a young kid and got back to Texas as quickly as I could, as we say in our state. And I started my career in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as a high school band director. I went on to do advanced degrees at the University of Texas at Austin, taught at two different universities, and have been an arts administrator now since 2008, and have been in my current position since 2013, overseeing the music activities of the University Interscholastic League. So that's my real brief story there. Oh, and also I'm a trombone player. Please don't hold that against me.
Well, fantastic. But I know you have some points that you would like to talk about this evening, and we'll just get some questions on the stream from Catherine, and I'll interrupt you just casually as we go along and keep it loose.
Fantastic. So the title of the presentation, just to get us started, United we stand, divided we fall. The title, and we've heard that saying, many of us have for a long time. And essentially the message is the importance of all of us working together, specifically with our different associations in our state. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of how we do things in Texas, how it functions well for us, and hopefully be able to answer questions that you have maybe along the way to help you. And again, this information is intended to be informational, helpful, not in any way is our process perfect. We're always trying to make it better, but we are fortunate. We have a great infrastructure in our state that I think serves our kids and our teachers well. So essentially, why is it important that we work together, all of us? I mean, we teach our kids, right, to work together. That's how we accomplish goals. That's how we have great music programs, is we teach our kids to work together. And I think sometimes as adults, we lose sight of that importance, right? That we all work together, not just within our staff, but within all the music teachers, and not just music teachers, but fine arts teachers for that matter, throughout the state and the nation, because we can accomplish more if we work together. And it certainly doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements, because we do. I think it's important to understand that how we handle those disagreements and discussions is largely is going to determine how successful we are, and again, in turn, determine how well we're able to serve kids and teachers. So I'll start by talking about the University Interscholastic League, which, yes, that is a bit of a mouthful. The UIL, as we say in Texas, and the University Interscholastic League was started in 1910 by the University of Texas at Austin. We actually were started as a debate league, and many people don't realize that debate came before athletics and before music in the UIL structure. Athletics followed shortly after, and music did not become a part of the UIL until after World War II in 1946. So our large function is that we provide a lot of the extracurricular activities per se in our state. Some people say that one of our particular activities is more of a co-curricular activity. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. But the three large events that we offer are solo and ensemble, obviously marching band, and concert and sight reading. And most people think that marching band is the largest activity we offer because it's the most publicly visible, but it's actually not the largest activity. We have about 130 to 140,000 students a year that participate in marching band. But our largest event is concert and sight reading, because concert and sight reading serves, you think about it, it serves band, choir, and orchestra, and it's also middle school and high school. So annually, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400,000 students that participate in the concert and sight reading aspect of what we do. So I'll talk more about that process coming up. But essentially, on a real broad perspective, the UIL provides concert and sight reading, marching band, and solo and ensemble. And then I'd like to share with you some of our sister organizations in Texas, starting with the Texas Music Educators Association, the TMEA in our state. For the students, they provide the all-state audition process. So the entire infrastructure that's associated with auditioning for all-state and all the steps that go along with that, they provide that. They also provide a huge advocacy base for our students and our teachers in the state. And I move on now to the Texas Bandmasters Association, the Texas Orchestra Directors Association, and the Texas Choir Directors Association. These three groups put on a convention every summer in San Antonio, and their most essential function is to provide staff development. So they provide staff development not only at these conventions, which is the largest concentration of staff development they provide, but they also provide staff development throughout the year with some satellite workshops that they provide, seminars, if you will, and weekend sessions. And the Texas Choral Directors Association also, as part of their summer convention, provides a middle school all-state choir, if you will. And they've started this a number of years ago. And essentially, that's what it is. I can't remember exactly if that's what they call it, but essentially, I believe it is a middle school all-state choir with a much simpler audition process than making all-state in high school. Many of our elementary music teachers participate also in the summer at the Texas Choral Directors Association convention. So again, our division-specific organizations, TBA, which is Texas Bandmasters, TODA, Texas Orchestra Directors, TCDA, Texas Choir Directors, which also serves many elementary music. And then on the larger scope, the TMEA, which serves every music educator. TMEA has divisions for band, choir, orchestra, elementary, and college division. So again, they're intended to serve all music educators and all students who are aspiring to become music educators. And they put on their annual convention, which occurs every year in February during the school year. And again, also serves as the culminating event for the students who audition for the all-state process and come together and have all-state band, all-state choir, and all-state orchestra. And that convention annually has attendance of somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 when you add exhibitors, students, directors, all the other attendees together. So in the University Interscholastic League in the UIL, we're serving again concert and sight reading, marching band, and solo and ensemble. Annually, we have approximately 750,000 student participants in our events. So some of those kids would be counted twice. Obviously, if you participate in marching band, you also participate in concert and sight reading. You're gonna count twice in that number, similar to how we would take class counts per se at a school. But about 750,000 students. And just to give you a little more perspective, so the population of Texas is about 26 million. We have about 6 million public school students in the state of Texas and about 750,000 annual participants in our music events just through UIL. I don't have those numbers for TMEA and our other sister organizations, but it's very large, and we do our best to provide this infrastructure to serve all of our students and teachers collectively. So we stay in communication with each other. We work together. I talk very regularly to the executive directors of TMEA, TBA, TODA, TCDA, again, to just share ideas. As you might imagine, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we've probably communicated more than ever ad nauseum sometimes, just to be sure that, hey, what are you guys considering doing? Like the biggest decision that had to be made first in the spring, like most states had to decide, was when and if we're going to cancel our events for the spring, right? And so most states, that happened sometime in March. We had to make the unfortunate decision to cancel the remainder of our spring events, which was basically concert and sight reading for probably almost 3/4 of our kids that hadn't been yet. And then we have a state culminating a state solo and ensemble contest that happens at the end of May. And that has about 20 to 25,000 annual participants, and we had to cancel that event. So once we made that decision, then the next decision that had to be made were the summer conventions. So that summer conventions, as I mentioned earlier, happen collaboratively, same time, same location between TBA, TODA, and TCDA. They had to make the very difficult decision earlier. I believe they made the final decision earlier in June to do a virtual convention at the end of July. And so just like the rest of us in the country, we're trying to not make decisions too soon, but we're trying to do what we think is best for our kids and teachers, and also within the infrastructure we're given from the state. So what I mean by that is we've worked very closely, the UIL has, with the governor's office and with the Texas Education Agency in everything that we've done related to COVID-19. So we have regular communication lines open with certain people in those two offices. We have recently put out some COVID-19 guidelines for resuming activities this summer. And so we had to spend a lot of time collaborating with TEA and the governor's office to get that all approved. And so I share that with you because sometimes there's a lot of layers that have to happen to get something done. But we feel like it's very beneficial to our students and directors because there's a lot of collaboration that happens. And so, as we discuss things behind closed doors, we may not always agree, as I mentioned earlier. And sometimes that's a good thing that we don't agree. But in the end, our goal is to be publicly united with our message, whatever that message may be, whether it's COVID-19, which obviously is the topic du jour, but with everything else we do. And I think that being publicly unified with your message does nothing but strengthen music education. So you think about that. If if the band directors have one vision of something, and the orchestra directors do, and the choir directors do, and then you've got your state associations not working together, then you're ultimately not serving your kids in the best way that you can, and your directors. And so what that can do is it creates confusion. outward arguing. And so, right, when we argue publicly and we display our laundry, if you will, publicly, I don't think that's beneficial to our kids and our teachers. I think it's better that we do that privately. And I'll get to that in a moment. I think you have to have an infrastructure to do that, because if you don't have that infrastructure in place to provide input, for everybody to provide input, then a lot of times that's what causes the outward disagreements that can lead to a lack of public trust with your processes. So you have to know your organization's greatest strengths. So at the UIL, we have to know what our role is. And as I explained to you, we have a very clearly defined role. TMEA has a very clearly defined role, as does TBD, TBA, TODA, TCDA. And so once we know those roles, then we collaborate together, but we know where each of our lines are, so we can, again, best serve kids. So that's our goal.
Brad, that was actually my first question for you from me, not from anybody on the stream, was just with this many moving parts and this many people trying to help and work together, the roles have to be super clear. You just be stepping on toes constantly, and you want to be able to do your job and not.
Yes, yes.
So I would think that's happened through a long process, would be my guess. When was this Interscholastic League founded?
1910.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've been around 110 years, and TMEA just celebrated their 100th year anniversary. In fact, this past February, they fortunately got the convention in, and it was the big 100-year celebration for them. So yeah, and the division-specific organizations are younger, but everybody has really, over especially I think the last 50 years, clearly understood what their role is with serving kids and teachers. And I feel like we do overall a great job of knowing where those lines are. For example, in talking about COVID-19, TMEA provides a lot of professional development, just like you do, obviously, in Tennessee. And so does the division-specific organizations in Texas. But I know they've communicated with each other to be sure they're not providing duplicate information for resources and information for teachers that relate to how to strategize in teaching during this COVID-19 time. And so again, communication, collaboration, those two words, you take anything away from this, communication and collaboration, you have to have those two elements to be successful. And again, I say successful. Success is best serving your kids and your teachers, and then that creates a stronger infrastructure that just gets stronger.
Absolutely. And I think what you just said about not duplicating things is one of the key things we've seen just across the country and beyond right now. Multiple people working on the same things that just don't collaborate. So thank you. Sorry to interject there, but I thought that was
that's great. Yeah.
Important point. Please continue.
Yeah. So to get a little more specific about our role at the UIL, so we are a member of a national organization called the National Federation of State High School Associations. That's a mouthful too, but in short, they go by the letters NFHS. And so we, like many other states, are a member of that association. And so we collaborate together with our peers from other states to share ideas to best serve our states. So I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to the NFHS, or the Federation as we call them, in Texas. So the UIL in Texas we are a state agency, and TMEA is a private association. So those are two important differences to know. So with us being a state agency, we have certain roles, and it's back to what I've already talked about, right? Know your role, know where your lines are, so you can stay in your lane, as we say. So being a state association, we cannot lobby our state government for certain actions because we are the state government. So by law, we're unable to do that. So TMEA in Texas, being a private association, can lobby for certain actions, and they do. They're very active. Their executive director, Robert Floyd, is very active in his lobbying efforts to support public school education and to preserve public school education. The required fine arts requirement we have, the fine arts requirement we have in a graduation curriculum. But it's not just, again, music education, even though that's the name of the association. We're always trying to do our best to advocate for the arts in general. So we try to always include dance and theater with our lobbying efforts. So the next important difference in the structure we have is, so we're a state agency and our membership is based on schools. TMEA's membership is individual. So in order to be a member of the UIL, your school has to join the UIL. In order for a student to participate in the UIL activities, your school has to be a member of the UIL. TMEA, on the other hand, is based on individual memberships. So anybody can join TMEA, not just music educators. A parent can join TMEA and identify their role as a parent, but also their membership structure allows homeschool students and private school students to participate in their audition process. In Texas, the UIL only allows public school students to participate in our events because membership is only open to public schools in Texas, with one exception. We do have, I have to mention, we have one exception to that, that if your equivalent organization does not allow you to be a member, you can apply for membership to the UIL. So the current result of that is we have 2 private schools that are members of the UIL because the Texas Association for Private and Parochial Schools, which is known as TAPS in Texas, did not want these 2 schools probably to be a member because they're outliers with how large they are. And so there's probably, competitive equity issues there. I'm just guessing. I don't know that for sure. So my understanding is we're not eligible for membership with TAPS. So they applied a membership with us and we allowed them to be members, and they compete in the largest conference, the largest grouping of schools in Texas, which is 6A. So again, TMEA in Texas is individual membership, UIL is school membership. So we have 3 divisions of the UIL. Like TMEA has the different music divisions. We have 3 divisions, first being athletics, second being academics, and third being music. So our athletics events serve over 1 million students, and our academic events serve approximately 500,000. And again, a lot of these kids count, and I mentioned the music number being about 750,000. So some of these kids count twice if they're involved in multiple activities, but we're serving a large portion of that 6 million public school students that I mentioned in Texas through our activities. And so our governance infrastructure in UIL essentially is as follows. So we have 3 branches, just like state and federal government do. And our first branch would be the legislative branch. We have an executive branch and we have a judicial branch. So our legislative branch is an elected group of superintendents. They are our rulemaking body, and they're known in UIL circles as in UIL rule, I should say, as the legislative council. They're elected by their peers, superintendents from across the state. We have representation from all 6 conferences, as well as some at-large representation. So again, they're the rulemaking body, the legislative branch. The executive branch would be those of us who work at the state office at UIL, and the judicial branch per se would be our committee process specifically that makes rulings based on rules violations, rule interpretations, and they're called the State Executive Committee. In some ways, they are essentially the Supreme Court of the UIL. So we have other committees on the regional level that hear rules violations first. And then just like any court process, a decision can be appealed up to a higher court. And so eventually, when the State Executive Committee of the UIL makes a ruling, that ruling typically is final at that point. So that's how our governance works. So we accept rule proposal changes. So this goes back to the whole collaboration, communication, and input process. So I mentioned our superintendents make the rules. Well, how do we come up with possible rule changes? Well, we have a process in music where we accept rule proposals from any of our stakeholders, including parents. But specifically for our music teachers, we have a committee called the Music Advisory Committee, and each music region in the state has a band, orchestra, and choir representative. And any region can submit a rule proposal. They would like to see something change in a marching band rule and a concert and sight reading rule. So they can bring that forward to their region. And if their region votes on it favorably, then it comes to us at the state, and then we send it to all the regions for a vote. And if it passes all the regions, or majority of the regions, I should say, then it comes back to us, and then we consider that through our legislative council for implementation. So we have an online process where if a parent wants to suggest a rule change, they can send that to us at any point. That's also on our website. So that's very important. I think that we have that stakeholder process with all our rules and how they're determined at the UIL. And we value that input. We want our directors to give us their thoughts. We want them to tell us how we can make our process better. We're always trying to evolve our rules. I mean, some rules need to change with the times, right? I'll give you an example of that. So we just went through a 2-year overhaul of our marching band adjudication process. And that started through a rule proposal suggestion on the region level that our evaluation process for marching bands was outdated and was essentially not evaluating what marching bands are doing in 2020. So we put together an ad hoc committee, which we typically do if we have a specific project that we need to address. And so we put together an ad hoc committee that had directors from different size schools, different parts of the state, to study the marching band adjudication process, to come up with new sheets to recommend to the UIL. And so that process took almost 2 years. And we did several surveys along the way to the membership to get their input. And those new sheets will be rolled out this fall as a result of that process. So that's an example of grassroots effort to change something that the UIL is doing, or evolve it, or whatever word you want to use. So that's how our rulemaking process works. The funding for the UIL, although we're a part of the University of Texas at Austin, we do not receive state funding directly. Our funding comes from our member schools through a membership structure. So every school, just like any individual that joins an association, you pay a membership. So our schools pay a membership, and that's our largest source of funding. We also have sponsorships and some gate receipts that help to fund us, but we do not receive. So we receive state funding, but we receive it via our member schools, not directly from the state, if that makes sense.
That was one of my questions. So you've answered almost every question I've written down.
So another association I've not mentioned yet that we work very closely with is the Texas Music Adjudicators Association. So as you might imagine, that's the group that provides the judges for our marching band and concert and sight reading events. So they're a separate association. We work very closely with them. I attend all their board meetings, and they train the judges. So they have a division for band, a division for choir, a division for orchestra on the concert side of things, and then they have a marching band division. And actually, we just started, they will be just starting in our recommendation, a mariachi division, because mariachi has become very big in Texas and is continuing to grow. So we're looking for ways to help develop the growth and development of that music genre in our state. And we felt like we have a shortage of judges who are qualified to adjudicate it. So TMAA has it's lots of T's. has started a branch for adjudicator training in mariachi. So that adjudicator training happens live at the conventions, either in February at the convention I mentioned that TMEA puts on, or also happens in the summer, what we call the summer conventions that TBA, TODA, and TCDA put on. And very excited that we just started, in the spirit of the times, offering remote training sessions. We had our first one, I believe, in the marching band division, and our marching band vice president, Jerry Miller from Coppell High School in the DFW area, presented that session and just did a great job with it. So I expect we'll see probably coming up more remote training sessions from that association. But I think that's an important part of our process as well, of providing that infrastructure of qualified judges. There's a process, if you want to join TMAA, they have their own website. There's a process that you apply for membership, and you have to have certain criteria, certain history of ratings. But again, that's all available on their website. So we work closely with them, although they're not a branch of the UIL. Obviously, since they're providing the adjudicators, we work hard to collaborate with them. So more stakeholder input. So we have more committees. Everybody always complains, right, and says, "Oh, another committee, another committee." But we have to have committees for input. If we don't have committees, then we don't have an input process. And we don't want our rulemaking process to come from the top down. We want it to come from the stakeholders, from the grassroots to us. What do you want the UIL to do so we can better serve you? That's what we're trying to find out all the time. And, sometimes that can be controversial because, as we know, at times people can feel like, well, everybody feels the way I feel. And that may not be the case. It may be your social media group that you hear from, but you may not be in the majority. And so we're trying to get as much input as we can, but we're also trying to determine what the majority of our stakeholders would like to see us do. And also at the same time, what we feel like is best for kids and teachers collectively, which sometimes is different for each division. We have slightly different adjudication sheets in concert and sight reading for each of our 3 divisions. We're going to have a pilot project this coming year to consider revising how we do the sight reading instruction period. And as you might imagine, I'm sure in Tennessee, sight reading is not controversial at all. It's probably just in Texas, right? So, so we discussed a revision of this process, and the goal of, and we had an ad hoc committee for that, and that ad hoc committee actually was through TMAA, and the goal was to try to revise the process in a way that better reflects how a piece of music is taught in the classroom. Even though it's a real short period of time, we felt like the process was too much of an assessment of what the director was doing and not always what the kids were actually doing and their actual music literacy. So through that process, we have a pilot starting this coming year where we essentially have less restrictions in the band and orchestra division. The choral division in Texas was not ready to make any changes, and we listened to those stakeholders, and we have not made any changes. So that's another example of us listening to our stakeholders via survey, holding off on any changes in that division because it is very different, right, than instrumental music. Many of those processes are different, and they have been different in our state for a long time as far as how the sight reading explanation period works in each of the 3 divisions. So we have a sight reading committee, continuing in the spirit of input. We have a sight reading committee in all 3 divisions. We have one in band, one choir, and one in orchestra. And each of those committees has 5 members. Representation by rule, those members are appointed to those committees by the UIL. And when we appoint those committees, we are considering geographic diversity as well as ethnic and racial diversity, and also different size schools. And they serve rotating terms of 2 years, and they review the sight reading music each year. So in Texas, we have the sight reading music composed in all 3 divisions every year. And a lot of states use our sight reading music and purchase it after the fact. And that's great. If we can help other states in that regard, we're happy to do that. But we have pieces composed, 6 different pieces in the band division, 12 different pieces in the orchestra division, because we have full orchestra and string orchestra. And then in the vocal division, it's even more complicated with that than that, because there are multiple variations, because we have mixed choir, we have tenor bass choir, and we have treble choir. So with all those 3 combinations, some of the pieces are reorchestrated and used in all 3 of those, some are not. But each of those committees makes the revisions to those pieces, reviews them each year, and then they are published by what is now Pepper Music, used to be RBC, and Pepper bought RBC. So I believe they're published now under the Pepper name. So that's another committee process we have. We also have, and I'll start by saying this, that when people ask me, what do you think that the UIL's biggest contribution to music education is? I mean, most people think it's marching band in some ways, because that's what the general public sees. But in the music education circles, in my opinion, our single biggest contribution is our prescribed music list. Our prescribed music list lives on the state website, the UILtexas.org website, and is a public domain resource that anybody can use. And there are 3 committees that review and make decisions on that large ensemble literature every year. And those committees have 7 members each. So band, choir, and orchestra, 7 members each. They serve overlapping terms. As we appoint those members by rule, we also consider geographic, cultural, and racial diversity on those committees as appointments are made. And while also seeking to find the most qualified teachers with the most outstanding records of achievement in our state, thus being some of the most respected teachers in the state. And so they make decisions based on the large ensemble literature every year. They can add a piece, they can move a piece to a different grade level, and they can remove a piece. So each committee makes that determination based on their own opinion of what the highest quality literature is available for every grade level. So we have 5 different grade levels on our large ensemble lists, 5 being the most difficult. We do not have 6 levels in Texas on our list, 1 to 5. And so they're asking themselves questions like, do we feel like this piece is appropriate for a long-term project in the classroom? For its given grade level, is it a piece that we feel like is worth the investment of time in the classroom over a long-term project, if you will, or on a long-term project? And so every committee has a differing opinion. And sometimes it gets very controversial if a committee takes a piece off the list. That's usually where we hear the most controversy, and we fully support that. Each committee making that decision, we don't push them to add a piece. That is strictly up to them on what they want to do. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that process, how it works. So each year we have an online portal on the UIL website that allows publishers, composers, directors, anybody can upload and submit a piece for the committees to consider. And in order for the committee to consider it, there has to be a score and there has to be a recording. So once that is uploaded, then the committees will review those pieces in each of the 3 divisions. The portal is open every year from September 1 to December 1. Closes on December 1. The committee finishes their reviews into early January, and they make final decisions in January. We have an in-person meeting in January in Austin for them to make their final decisions. They give those to us, and then all of those updates are made in the summer. So we're in the process of doing that right now. My colleague, Gabe Musella, who is the lead on our prescribed music list process, is working as we speak on all the updates for next year's PML. And so it goes live on September 1. And we don't make any changes during the school year unless there's an error. So if we find a typo we find something that's an inadvertent error, we will correct that during the year, but we don't add a piece, we don't take a piece off, because that would create confusion, right? If somebody says, well, wait a minute, that piece was there in October and now it's not there in February, or this piece wasn't there in October and now it's there. So once a year is when we make those updates based on the committee input. So that's large ensembles. Now we get into all the solos and the small ensembles. So we have, people think of just about our large ensembles, but we have over 20,000 titles on our prescribed music list. Every imaginable, well, I shouldn't say every imaginable, but many imaginable combinations of instruments in the small ensemble event codes, we call them, and you can search that by event code, and then also all the solo event codes that we have. Now, our solo and our small ensemble literature, I mentioned in the large ensemble literature, it's grades 1 to 5, 5 being the most difficult, 1 being the least difficult. Well, in solo and small ensemble literature, we only have 1 to 3, but it's the opposite. So don't ask me, I know that's like, why do you have the opposite? So the term we use is class. So a class 1 is the most difficult, a class 2 is a medium difficult, and a class 3 is least difficult. And students can play off of any of those lists. And we hope that their directors work with them and collaborate to choose the literature that will help the student to improve, that's not too difficult for them, but also will allow them to improve through the process. And sometimes that means choosing a class 3 or a class 2 for a high school student that may be maybe not quite as developed as some other students their age. Maybe they started in music program at a later age, and for whatever reason don't have the background. But to get to our state solo and ensemble contest, you have to play a class 1 or sing a class 1, and you have to get a Division I rating on the region level. So sometimes, unfortunately, we'll see a case where directors will push their students to do class 1s just in the hopes to get them to have an opportunity to go to state, when educationally, that might not be in the best interest of the student to be learning a class 1. Maybe they should be learning a class 2 or class 3 that will help develop their musicianship better than a piece that's too difficult for them. So this review process, we're in the middle of a 5-year review process of this right now. We have subcommittees that we formed, that Gabe Musella has formed to help divide and conquer this enormous project. And he's submitting all the data and entering all the data himself into the PML database to go live on September 1 with all the reviews that we did this past year. Our percussion review, shout out to Dr. Zader again, because Dr. Brian Zader has graciously chaired this percussion review process for a number of years for us now, and just has done a great job of facilitating that, getting so many great percussionists to weigh in on the solos and small ensembles. We've added a lot of event codes recently. For example, in the percussion area, we added a steel drum category. We've added we've added a couple of other event codes in percussion. We added a trombone choir event code this past year. So we're trying to grow and develop. We're also in the spirit of small ensembles. We're going to have this coming year our first ever state chamber music competition coming up this year. So we're very excited about that, and hopefully that will be able to happen. That's not scheduled till the spring. But, again, we're looking for other ways to help develop the individual musicians. The small ensembles are a great way to do that. And that event is intended to be for our most advanced students playing that highest level literature. So those students will be able to submit a recording of their ensemble. The recording will be ranked by the first panel, and we'll invite a small number of groups to come, and like you see at many small ensemble or chamber music competitions, to participate in the finals of that in late March here in the Austin area. So that's another new event we have. I mentioned mariachi earlier. So we just finished our 5th year of having a state mariachi festival. And we're very excited and proud about that genre of music and helping to grow and develop it in Texas. It's been an important part of our culture for a long time. and has been in many of our schools for a long time. And UIL started a regional level event in 2008 and has seen growth since then. And we felt like in 2014, when we considered this rule proposal, that it was time to start a state event. So we've seen, just in the 5 years we've had that event, we've seen the number of groups qualify for the state festival go up by almost 50%. And that's just, that event is so unique, as you know, in its own way. And one could make the argument that that's the only event that combines band, choir, and orchestra all into one small ensemble, because obviously you have violins, you have trumpets, the kids sing, you have guitars, you have abuelas, you have guitarrones, you have harps sometimes, and you have all other combinations of instruments too, that sometimes we see vibes, sometimes we see flutes in place of violins. But I just think it's so exciting that so many more kids are getting the opportunity to experience that music as well. So gosh, so that and so our infrastructure, we have, I mentioned the state office. So there's three of us that work at the state office in UIL. Gabe Musella, who I've mentioned, myself, and Rebecca Kins is our senior admin assistant. And she makes sure that Gabe and I are doing what we're supposed to all the time. She's great. And so that's it in music at the state office. And so oftentimes people wonder, well, how can we serve, 750,000 annual participants with three people? And the reason that we're able to do that is not three people. We have a region executive secretary in every music region that puts on all the region events. And so we have 33 music regions right now in Texas. That expanded in 2016. We expanded from 28 regions to 33 because of the growth in Texas, specifically, as we call it in Texas, the I-35 corridor, which is San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas-Fort Worth, and of course the greater Houston area. So that growth precipitated the creation of 5 more regions. So we have 33 regions, and each region, we function together with TMEA. So if you're in Region 12, you're in TMEA Region 12, you're also in UIL Region 12. And TMEA does the all-state audition process in Region 12. And the kids participate in concert and sight reading and marching band and solo and ensemble in Region 12 through UIL. So we have region meetings, and UIL business is discussed, TMEA business is discussed, and also we have an association called the Association of Texas Small School Bands. So the ATSSB, as we call it in Texas, they provide the all-state audition infrastructure for just the small bands in Texas. So they do auditions for 1A, 2A, 3A, and 4A all-state. They work collaboratively with UIL, with TMEA for the February convention where the all-state students come together. So ATSSB, as we call it, was formed in the early 90s to provide this all-state audition structure for just the small schools, just in band. Now, TMEA has a small school all-state choir, but the reason the band division is different in this regard is there are more small schools in our state that have bands. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, but by and large, you may see a small school in Texas and they might not have a choir, they might not have an orchestra, but they most likely, if they have a music program in the high school, it's a band program. So we have more small school bands in Texas than choirs and orchestras, but we did start through TMEA a small school all-state choir just recently, I want to say in the last 3 to 4 years, which is intended to be for those students from small high schools. And in Texas, when we say small schools, we're generally referring to 4A and down. Our large schools are 5A and 6A. Just to give you some more perspective on data, and I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, and I apologize if I'm moving too fast, but we have approximately 1,500 high schools in UIL, 1,500. And approximately 1,100 of those 1,500 have some type of organized music program that we're aware of because they enter our events. So out of those 1,100 high schools that have organized music programs, approximately half of those are 5A and 6A schools. So if you think about the numbers, if half the schools that do music are 5A and 6A, they're going to have more than half the kids that participate because their programs are larger. So we also have, going back briefly to the school membership in Texas through UIL, charter schools in Texas are publicly funded, so they are eligible for UIL membership. So some of that 1,500 is charter schools. Some of that 1,500 high schools are specialty schools that are per se a magnet school in a school district that may not have a music program. It might be a science magnet that has no music program. So that gives you an idea of the breakdown of the schools that we serve. That doesn't count middle schools. Again, that's just high schools. Middle schools do not have to pay a school membership. They participate in UIL activities through their high school membership in UIL. So that's, I'll be happy to take some questions. I'm going to take a little drink of water here.
Please, you and me both. Wow. We have a few questions, Brad, but
yeah,
I don't know if I want to ask some things selfishly just based on the latest feedback. Again, you've answered almost every question I had. I normally am very techie, but I'm like writing. My head's been down the whole time because my mind is blown by the sheer infrastructure and the fact that, you mentioned these organizations have been around for a very long time, and that's allowed the cohesion and the evolution and the partnership to all work seamlessly together. So I guess working, I'm a PAS person. Prior to Brian was PAS president, so I've done some national and international work, but then really working hard with my state music association right now, and our president and our president-elect are both on, I can see, and Leif's just typed in a question, and they're the glue in making this program happen. But what I have to say, I guess, I'm from a small town. I'm one of those rural teachers. I was a kid that did not have access to.
I grew up in a small town too, so I certainly understand.
So I always have the runt of the litter at the front. But the fact that you have an association or dedicated to that different group,
yeah,
like the layers here are really
yeah.
exciting and inspiring, and also extremely intimidating because they've taken so long to make happen. So I guess I would say, what are your words of inspiration for the states, for the leaders of states watching that don't have this type of infrastructure? I know it's communicate, it's
collaborate,
but you can't just fast forward things by 40 years and make that type of thing happen. COVID's helping, I think, with that actually. So I think COVID is sort of the steroid that we all need. I mean, I have friends that I haven't engaged with across the state. Tennessee's really long and skinny and has specific challenges that Texas has as well, I think, just being so large. And
yes, I can imagine.
we're really long. So, Leif is 9 hours from me listening across the state. But are there any specifics, I guess, just in terms of jump-starting some of the magic that you have described here, other than just collaborate and take the step and try and get it going? I mean, it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think to me the most important step is listening to people, and have meetings and just ask questions like, what do we need to do to better serve you? Depending on if you feel like, is there a hole in what you have maybe in your state? We don't have this, whatever this is. We need to develop something that better serves this. Could it be a better lobbying effort in your state for policy with state law? So, in our state, that role is done through TMEA, and TMEA, hires lobbyists specifically for the fine arts lobbying agenda in our state. So that's their role. And so, some states need more advocacy on the government level, starting with the state legislature. So, it could be that. It could be that you work through your MEA and our MEA, I know, would be happy to help you with providing some guidance on how to lobby for that. I think that we all need to remember that we need to be perceived in our communities as inexpendable. We have to be vital. The best way to say is that we're vital to the success of our schools. And that means that our programs can't go away. It's like, I heard recently, I forgot who it was that said, but, through this COVID-19, everything that's important is going to survive, right? Everything that's important is going to survive. So we're going to reap what we've sown all these years, where we've been advocating for our programs and building those programs. Now is where we're going to find out how well we've advocated for our programs, right? So now's not the time to be the squeaky wheel and say, oh yeah, we're important, don't forget about us over here. If we've done a good job of that, I think we will survive. If we haven't done a real good job of that, then it could be a little more tenuous at this time, a little more uncertain. But if your kids in your community value the arts and they value music education, you're going to survive. It's like I've been hearing Bob Morrison talk a lot lately about, it's not the what that's going to change during COVID-19, but it's the how that's going to change. So we don't want the what being music education. Music education, we don't want that to go away, right? But we might have to deliver music education a little differently or temporarily, but we'll get through this. And so I think you just have to figure out, back to your question, where are the holes and how you can better serve your kids. And you've got to have open and honest dialogue, and you've got to do it in the right way. You don't want to air it publicly. You don't want to get on social media or some random website that's anonymous so people can just start ranting on there. You need to do it, put together committees, have representation, people that are respected in the profession, and then share ideas. So you create a open atmosphere of sharing concepts and ideas.
Now, it would be interesting to think about, I guess I don't know with athletics, and you work with all these different groups, that are not arts related specifically, but, if we had national oversight for some of these things, it's I know it's states' rights, but
yeah.
There's a lot
of the National Federation of State High School Associations that I mentioned, we work with them. We're a member of that association. And for example, they've just put out the first round of their marching band guidelines for this coming year. And they've made that very clear that they're simply guidelines, and that states can adapt these and use what they want and not use what they want. It's fine, but it's a basic infrastructure. And I know those were released. And if your state doesn't have guidelines, or even if they do, I would advocate that you look at the Federation guidelines and compare them. Our state guidelines are on our website, and we're continuing to update those through the summer. And we have some differences in our guidelines than the Federation has in theirs. And so you ultimately have to do what your stakeholders and your state agencies expect you to do in your state.
No, absolutely. I've got a couple others, and then we have some on the stream as well. And I don't want to hold you too long, but one thing you mentioned early on is that parents can be stakeholders. And I think that sometimes organizations fear that kind of public feedback because, maybe it's my kid didn't win whatever audition because it was rigged. There's
of course.
I found that to be very compelling when you said that. So, but transparency is key.
Yes.
So how do you navigate the rogue parent? I guess you have a committee vetting those solicitations that go through your online comment.
Well, for example, we just had our summer meetings last week with our Legislative Council of Superintendents, and every proposal that was submitted by the public, which is usually parents, the general public, was considered. and some of them were the same. So some of them could be considered with one discussion, but they're all considered. And sometimes something comes out of one of those rule suggestions. And so one of the actions the superintendents will tell us will, they may tell us, we'll study this proposal, which means that we just continue to gather more input. We talk to band directors, choir directors, whatever the teacher group may be, coaches in the case of athletics, to see if it's viable. So I think you can't be scared to get input from everybody, because I think if you deny that input, you're not helping yourself in the long run if it appears that you're putting a wall around your process.
No, agreed. In the same way teachers get student evaluations, we read those sometimes and we're like, oh, no, I don't do that. And you're like, oh, maybe I do. So it's important to at least ask for the feedback and vet it. That's a great point. I see that Leif has commented on this, and this was another question I had. By the sheer infrastructure and all these different groups collaborating and working together, do schools ever find it limiting? I mean, is there flexibility within that, I guess, is my question and his.
Flexibility in what regard?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, the repository list, the adjudication standards. I mean, it's very solidified, which is comforting in a sense. But also, do you have groups that resist that? Or he's probably going to say it better than me. Is the extraordinarily detailed structure of UIL ever perceived as limiting in any way? There, Leif said it more eloquently.
In all fairness, I would say I'm sure that some do feel that way. And our response to that is we are open to improving our processes. And so, it can appear as sometimes being a bit overbearing, I think. I know when I was a music teacher, as a young music teacher, I would wonder why things took so long to happen at the UIL. Now I understand why, because we have a process to consider everything, and that takes time, and it also takes a lot of input to put that process together. But I think probably the answer, some people would probably say the answer to that is yes, and we don't want it to be that way, and we're trying to continue to improve it to where it's not that way. We don't believe it's that way, but depending on what your agenda is, somebody could be stuck on one thing and say, you know what, they won't change this. I don't know why they won't change this, whatever this is, and then perceive it as inflexible. But that could be also because they think they're right or they're in the majority, but actually they're not.
I just think having a process to create the changes is great across the state. I got another question here from my friend Leif, and I know we're a little over time, so I'll wrap it up soon, Brad. You've worked hard.
I'm good. You tell me. I'm fine.
Okay. He says, what's the average size of a Texas high school, if there is such a?
The school itself. Okay, so we have 6 conferences, as I mentioned earlier. 6A is the largest. The smallest 6A is 2,250 students in grades 9 through 12. And the largest high school in Texas, and before I say this, I want to tell you they're an outlier. The largest high school in Texas has almost 6,000, or actually I think has more than 6,000 students. The majority of our 6A high schools fall somewhere around 3,000. And then it goes down from there. I think our smallest high school, the smallest high school in the state, reported an enrollment in grades 9 through 12 of 9.
9?
Yes, 9.
Where was that?
It's a small town in West Texas called Marathon.
I've been there. No.
Yeah. Oh, you know where that is then? Yeah. I think it was Marathon.
Yeah.
I believe. But yeah, so we have, most people think of our mega schools when they think of Texas, but we have a lot more small schools than we do the big ones.
Wow. No, we do too. I want to ask one question too. The first time we spoke on the phone about this in the interview, we talked about the partnership and value of working with athletics and other disciplines in order to create this type of infrastructure and support that you now represent with UIL. Can you talk about that just a little bit historically, and maybe how, especially with COVID, I think there are some inroads reopening for making those types of relationships and how that's benefited your organization and programs in Texas?
Well, I think in our case, I will say it's very valuable that we work together with athletics. We're in the same building. We collaborate with our senior staff on all decisions that are made between our academic department, our athletic department, our music department. And so I think it's extremely valuable. It's beneficial to the schools that we collaborate as those decisions are made. And you know, just like we said in music, one size doesn't fit all, right? So there are things that athletics they do that we don't do. But there are some things that we do together. And in Texas, high school football is a very important activity to the citizens of Texas and in our schools. And marching band obviously is associated with football. And so we try to make decisions together when we can, when it makes sense, with marching band and football, especially right now as it relates to the COVID situation, because those are our two activities that are coming next, the first of the school year, the biggest activities. Certainly in music, it's marching band, and athletics, it's football. And then they have other sports that start up too, like volleyball this fall. But we have a great relationship. My colleagues, the director of athletics, director of academics, we communicate regularly. It's another example of communication and collaboration just within the UIL to work with our senior staff to make decisions that consider and we hope benefit all of our kids collectively.
It's a great response. Just on a personal note, then, I'm a chair of a music department with a football team and, athletics, and we're getting ready for marching band and planning all these things and trying to lead my folks in that preparation. And what's the word on the street with football?
Well, in Texas, the word on the street right now is we're going forward. Our schools are telling us they want us to go forward. They want the kids to have their activities. Our kids have been out of school late spring and they're missing their activities, but we also want to do it safely. And we're not sure if that's possible, but we're listening to our stakeholders. Like I said, we met with our superintendents last week, and the state agencies, the governor's office, the TEA, the UIL, and the superintendents in Texas. Unless they don't want us to have our activities, the expectation is that we have our activities. And it's really hard right now. I mean, if you're a high school marching band director and you're watching this, I just can't imagine how difficult it is for you right now because of the uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen this fall. And so many marching band directors are trying to decide, well, what if we reach the point of no return with investing in a highly competitive show, and then it can't happen because of COVID? And none of us have the answers to that question. We don't know the answer to that question. But the answer I would give right now is we're charged with going forward with our activities, and it'd be much easier to plan for the activities now and have to cancel them than not plan for them and then have to have them after not planning. And so we're planning for our activities to happen, and we're monitoring the virus, and it's been surging in Texas, and we're all very concerned about that right now.
Now, my husband's from Fort Worth, and we saw the Star Telegram ad on the weekend had like a, "Hey, Fort Worth, wear a mask," so it was crazy. But with thinking about these states that don't have the same infrastructure as you do, and I'm sure that marching band directors in Texas are scared and confused and planning 3 different shows based on all those scenarios. But for those in states that don't really have any guidance, I mean, their principals are not music experts. They're they're not the experts in their field, I think people feel really alone. And that's a better or a great argument for how state music associations and universities and high schools and middle schools can work together right now to collaborate. Even if they're not formal organizations like what you've described tonight, we can get together and talk about what each other is doing and try to share
Yes.
ideas on what is safe and for guidelines, not,
Yes. And you're right. It's really difficult when you're the music teacher in the town.
yeah.
You don't know what everybody else is doing, and our goal is to provide every time something gets updated, we have an email blast system to send it out through our state office, and we get word to our region music secretaries to share it with their stakeholders, and so we do our best to get the word out. And what's driving people crazy right now is the yeah but what if this happens, yeah but what if this happens. And in Texas, we typically believe in local control. And so, what I mean by that is we provide an infrastructure with basic rules and allow the schools to function within those rules. And sometimes um, people don't want local control, right? If they want you to tell them what to do, if it fits a specific agenda that they want. But if it doesn't fit the agenda, the first thing you hear is, don't tell me what to do.
Right. But now I need guidance.
Yes, yes. So it's very difficult, and so largely, again, we try to allow our schools to decide how to operate within the infrastructure we give them, and we definitely have some, as we say in Texas, some fences that you're not supposed to cross, and if you do, then there are consequences for crossing those fences. But by and large, we try to make the yard as large as we can so you can operate within a lot of space.
No, that makes complete sense. And I will ask one more question. Dr. Leif Cook says, I don't want to dominate tonight, but he has one more question. I think this is a great one to end on, and it might be hard to answer, but he's asking about scholastic travel, aka
Yeah.
March. And so,
Yes. Well,
so
that's a great question, because if schools can't travel, then that answers the question real quickly, right? We can't get them there. We can't put them on buses, and we don't know what that's going to look like right now. The busing restriction currently is very limiting. I don't know what it is in your state, but in our state, I can't remember what it is as of today. I think maybe it's 50% capacity. And so if you think about a big band that normally has to have 8, 9 buses, you're going to be able to put them on 16, 18 buses. And, so, yeah, we don't know what that's going to look like, but it could be something like that. We're also concerned about crowds and what we're going to be able to do in the way of crowds. Our state marching band championships are in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. And, we can't pay for the building if people don't come. So that building is not inexpensive, and so we rely on the ticket revenue to pay the bills. And so even if we're fully open, so to speak, with spectators, are people going to come? Those are all things we don't know the answer to right now either. So we're planning to have it, and we'll deal with those challenges along the way as they come. But yeah, the transportation piece, we could end up with some schools that, are not going to let their bands travel because maybe they have an outbreak. Something happens locally and they're unable to travel. We just don't know that at this point. But you're right. The transportation piece is the catalyst to having all of our events.
I'm saying this without any preparation, Brad, but I wonder just if it comes to that, by having, home visiting stadiums where your stadium is vacant for a weekend, if there's ways to get the band to perform and be recorded and, you know, project that if nothing else. I know we don't want that, but that's at least a way for them to spread out and not be near the public and get it won't be the hype that we all want, but it's at least a way to perform. And
Well, I can assure everybody, we'll look at every option we have if it gets to the point where we can't have our competitions. We certainly will look at something like that. As you might imagine, copyright could come into play with something like that. But I would hope that we might get some leeway in an extenuating circumstance like that from the copyright holders. But yeah, we certainly will explore every way to do what we can to allow kids to have those experiences.
Well, I'm going to let you off the hook. You have been I'm so inspired by the organization of Texas tonight, and I knew I would be, but thank you for joining us. And I'll do a quick wrap up and might stay on with you for just a second to say a few
Well,
things.
thank you so much. I appreciate everybody for joining tonight, and we're happy to be a resource to help any of you in any way we can. And I have nothing but admiration for music teachers in our schools. I mean, you're the ones on the front lines with our kids all the time, and you're the ones that are making a direct impact and difference in their lives. And as a parent of two teenagers too, I just can't say thank you enough. So keep up the great work and keep a positive attitude through this COVID-19 situation. It's really difficult, but keep your glass half full, and keep looking for ways to navigate through it. And it will pass eventually, and we'll all be okay.
Wonderful. Brad, I'm going to do my little script here, and then we'll stay on for a second. Tune in weeknights, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central to keep watching Keeping the Beat live, and remember to tell your friends about our program. Our upcoming artists include tomorrow evening, but James Stevens, Director of Advocacy and Educational Resources with Music for All. James is awesome. This Thursday night, also, we have composer Stephen Snowden, who's a friend and percussionist. Next week, we have a great lineup. I'll just highlight a few and not read everyone. We have songwriter, guitarist Lindsay L. on Monday evening from Canada, and she's evidently a very big Instagram star, and we're excited to have her on. And one of your colleagues, Brad, Texas legendary music educator Jerry Junkin, will be on Tuesday.
Oh, fantastic. Jerry was one of my teachers.
Oh, awesome. So just to name a few. Another plug I would like to put in that I'm very proud that we've secured is on July 7th, we'll have on Joan Jett and Kenny Laguna. And they're going to be talking about how they use their platform and success in the music industry to serve as their platform for advocacy on a larger scale and to a broader audience. So everyone, please mark your calendars for that. And we have many other exciting artists. We're going to wrap up this program. I think it's July 14th is the last night, and we'll be ready to conclude by then. But for folks in Texas listening to Brad for the first time tonight, hope you'll tune in frequently and share with your friends. Finally, thanks so much to Dr. Brad Kent for his time, wisdom, and inspiration this evening. And everyone have a great night.
Thank you.